Hey. Welcome to episode 197, the Titanforge podcast. I'm Dratnos, joined by Tettles and Trell, as always. And this
Poggers.
week, our special guest is, for I believe the third time, Plkatv. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be back. How you guys all doing?
Dude, we were talking about how this is your third time back in our Discord the other day, and I had to go back and look at what topics we had talked with you about last time. And the first episode that you're on, Dratnos had like a legendary opening. It was the Fame Slayer, the Banshee Queen one. It was like I saw it, I was like, no way.
He's like, and Trill, Breaker of Chains. Oh, thanks, Stradnos.
Yeah. That was kind of messed up. Open question of whether that'll be doable again this tier or not. I saw you guys killed Tindril, so I think you're on track for Hall of Fame this year, right? Like, should be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think we're like World 104, and it's like top 200.
Yeah. That's
just gotta add a little bit more overtime days. Take more raid days from 2024 and put them into 2023. That's it, you know.
Yeah, it's not overtime if it's like you're rescheduling raid days from the future, of course.
Exactly. But I've been watching. I actually have been really liking watching guilds either close to killing Tindril or close to killing Fireack. And then you watch the guilds kill Tindril, and then I'm just not interested again until they're close to killing Fireack. So because like P1, P2, but I've been doing a lot of stream lurking. So I caught your guys. I think it was you guys that had a. Was it you guys? Maybe it was not. There was like a 0.7% wipe.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about that pull. That made it to like a WoW highlights video, and
you guys had one, and then Temerity also had one that happened as well yesterday or something. So both of the they were mixed together in my head. But yeah, there's some tragic low percent Tindril incidents.
Dude, Dratnos, how the hell did you guys get like? Would you guys get like World 15th or something this tier?
16th. Yeah, it was.
How did that happen?
We didn't even overtime as well for it. We like added one day, but I was flying on one day, so we lost one day. So it even out.
Is it China's gone? Like,
it's because it was
just cooking.
It was a skill-based tier, a difficult tier, and any kind of tier like that is always the cream's gonna rise to the top, in a tier like that.
Oh word.
Yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yeah.
How many echo strats did you take? With all the insider information you got over there.
Oh yeah, I yanked a lot of stuff from there. That's good tech. The echo strats, some liquid strats as well. When we started on Fireack, the documentation for the liquid weak aura for Fireack wasn't out yet, so we just went into the weak aura and changed out all the player names for our players that were playing the same class. But then we had to copy their strat because we didn't know how to move people around in the intermission. So because we just had to have everybody in the same places as their liquid counterparts. So yeah, a little bit of yoinking from both guilds.
Why is everybody using the liquid pack over echo stuff here?
The liquid pack came out sooner.
Okay.
And I think it's also better like maintained and better documented how it's supposed to work.
Okay.
I don't think there's really any huge functionality differences between the two or anything.
Because people are using the liquid one and the Northern Sky one, I think, in tandem, right?
So the Northern Sky one came out first, which it was out before the liquid pack was out.
Okay. Rela putting in overtime, apparently.
Yeah, which, that pack is really good. I think guilds reaching bosses now will probably mostly use the liquid pack, but my guide videos for like Smolderon and Laradar and Naimu all use the Northern Sky pack because when we killed those, the Northern Sky pack was the only one that was out, right? So there may be people that are just yoinking those because they are copying those sorts of guides, anything that came out back then. But I don't know. I think I would recommend the liquid pack for everybody. I think that's if you haven't done prog yet, just yoink that one because it just has everything.
I think MB in our chat made a good point. I think the Echo pack requires their Echo Raid Tools add-on, and I was actually looking at that for the first time yesterday, and it looked a little buggy, a little unfamiliar. Yeah. Maybe that's another reason for all this.
I think that's fair. It's like kind of clunky. You download the weak auras in the dungeon journal for each boss, and you like go and click through, but it's definitely not as like friendly as the Liquid pack is, where you just go to the Wago site and you just download it and it just has the documentation for how to set all the notes up and stuff.
Interesting.
I will say the Liquid pack, I would turn off all the like bars and stuff for almost every ability. Most of that stuff is I feel superfluous or too much on the screen, but the functional, the few crucial functional weak auras out of it are, I think, really, really good.
In other news, Pika, Hero Talents got announced. You got an interview with developers? How did you swing that?
Oh, I just, we met at BlizzCon and we were like, oh, you're Plkatv, you're a big deal, right? I'm like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. You need me to do anything for you? I got you. They're like, would you please do the dev interview for me? And I'm like, I'll think about it. I'll see if I can fit it in between Mythic Plus and Prague. And then after that, I was like, yeah, sure, why not? but actually, they're just looking for different influencers this time to talk about the Hero Talents for the new upcoming expansion. And since nobody really plays Warrior, because we're both not meta in Raid and not in Mythic Plus, there's only a small little pool you can choose from. So they're like, that guy plays Warrior, perfect.
Yeah, you and Bajira. I was like, holy moly.
It's not even fair. Okay, so like right before our like huge podcast huge interview, I'm like stressing out. I'm like, oh, this is super serious. This is like, I need to be on top of my game. I'm like writing out notes and like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Everything. Like, I'm like talking to their crew. Like, okay, so I think this is the format we should go. I look at Bajira and I'm like, he's probably also like freaking out, trying to figure out what he's doing. I look at his stream and the guy's just pumping iron. Like, he's just lifting weights like 5 minutes before, and like he's just like, okay, guys, I gotta go. Shuts off his stream. 5 minutes later, hey guys, I'm in the dev interview. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're about the same, we were probably both doing the same thing right before this.
It's probably like his pregame ritual for a big moment.
Was it one of the ones where like you got access to it a few hours before and you got to like look through it and prep some questions or whatever, and then actually ask them about it?
Oh, well, we actually got the prep. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say it, but
okay.
Oh well, who knows? But well, I mean, I got it. I got the information like about a week and a half in advance, so
wow.
I was able to see it and like kind of figure it out to make sure like everything is okay, and then develop questions based off of that, or like basically of it. Yeah.
How you feeling about the Mountain Thing Warrior stuff?
It's pretty sick. Whenever I think about it, I'm always like I played a lot of Warcraft 3. Like growing up, and every time you get like the Mountain King and level 6 goes for Cosmodon, and like he runs up and like runs into the pack. This one kind of feels like brings back a lot of that nostalgia. I think the main thing that I like about it is that it really brings back into the essence of everyone's favorite version of Prot Warrior. If you ask any Prot Warrior, they're always like BFA, right? Like BFA Prot Warrior is where it was at its peak, and that play style of playing everything around Thunderclap. So that is kind of like the theme of Mountain Thing. Is all about like big thunderclaps, big visuals, and like doing a lot of like passive damage through thunderclap while also being to assist your team with like the new version of version of Safeguard, which is like a Storm Shield, which is like puts a big magic shield on your team. So it's like a 30-second sat, but it only affects magic damage. So we'll see how that kind of plays out.
That sounds awesome. That is such a good ability.
That and the choice note is against the AoE stun on Stormbolt, although it's 3-target stun, so
no one's gonna choose that thing. That thing is like it's dead in like I think it's dead in every place but maybe PvP, but even PvP that stun DRs everything for a 2-second stun versus like the 4-second variant or whatever. So it's not like fantastic. It's cool to look at.
Yeah. A lot of cool stuff in here. I was looking at it, I was just thinking like the chances here are so low. Right, like 10% chances to proc lightning strikes, and then all the things that proc off of that are also like 10 or 20% chances. So you multiply those together, and you're getting to like 1 or 2% chances of things proccing. But the whole like amping up just raw thunderclap damage, right? Just a passive thunderclap damage increased by 50%. I'm like, yeah, all right, that's exciting. I think it's gonna be really cool when we first get the second hero talent tree for any spec, right? Like, I'm sure they're going to show us a bunch of different ones first, and then when they reveal like the 15th hero talent tree, it's actually going to overlap with one of the earlier ones they revealed, and we'll actually be able to see like what our options are for any of these, because it's like there's a whole other tree you could play as a Prot Warrior as well, right? That we just don't know anything about what it does. That might also be really cool.
For sure, but like when I look at this like from a conceptual standpoint, Mountain Thing looks like they built it for Prot Warrior and then Fury into it.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
agree.
like
Yeah, that's what I was
why
thinking too.
I don't love that kind of concept, and I don't know if that's how it's going to be for every single tree, because it's kind of clunky. Like some parts of it are really clunky for Fury Warrior, and it kind of pigeonholes you into, oh, this is going to be like a Bloodthirst build. Whereas the other one, I guess it's going to be the Raging Blow variant, and if it's not, I don't even know how it's going to like really compete.
The Sand Lane DK one also kind of read like that to me, where it was, I don't know, it read like it was supposed to be like really unholy focused, and Blood seemed like it was like retrofitted into it.
It's weird because thematically, Sand Lane is way closer to Blood than Unholy, but yeah.
I mean, just like playstyle wise, like the stuff that it was giving you read like it was supposed to be like an unholy tree, right?
Yeah, I think that is going to be one of the big challenges they have as well, is how to really make these enticing and balanced between the two specs, right? Because like,
yeah,
I don't know, if they have to start going in here and like balancing this proc rate to be different between Fury and Prot, for instance, I think that's going to start feeling really clunky. So hopefully they have some good knobs ready to tune it separately for the two different specs if they need to.
Side note, I think they need to get out of adding defensives into any of these. We gotta get away from that. Like, please stop adding defensives into these hero trees. Like,
you don't like the 30%
the shimmer
DR for 2 seconds on hover for?
Obviously, that's the one that's like the shimmer evoker hover 30% DR thing. Absolutely not. Like, there's already so many problems with defensives in the game right now. I think that adding them into the hero tree is insane.
Yeah.
Bell's just mad because his only defensive is bear form.
No. I not. Okay, do you not think that there are issues with defenses in the game right now where specs have too many defensives and healers aren't playing
absolutely
a large enough role?
I
Okay,
totally agree.
Then shut up. Stop teasing me.
I don't know if it's a bad thing to put them in the hero trees. I mean, as long as they have like a good spread of them, I think it's fine.
I mean, they need to remove. Okay, then they need to start removing them out of the class tree.
Yeah, like
That's a good point. Like
Og getting another one, I do think is. It's so weird, right? A 30% DR that shrinks over 2 seconds is such a awkward because it's powerful, but it'll be so fiddly to actually use it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's like similar to like Rune Tap, right? Like I mean, not like the reducing part, but it's like such a short like duration of it. But like Rune Tap is only like 2, 3, 4 seconds or whatever like that. So it's kind of very similar.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that works better for tanks than it does for DPS. Generally speaking, like how often are you're gonna blink 2 seconds before the O-Cart stomp? You're actually really gonna time that?
Well, 2 seconds before isn't gonna help you because it's gone by 2 seconds, right? Even if you do it 1 second before, it's only a 15% DR. Like you have to like.
I am old.
You have to like, if you actually want the 30 or 20, like you only have 2/3 of a second. The first 2/3 of a second where it's giving you 20% or more DR, right? So
it's not that hard.
Yeah, it's just
we all
like
have add-ons that do big timers for us.
It's gonna be weird. You're gonna be holding your global to press this right before the damage instead of pressing it and then doing your global because it'll be too small by the end of your global.
I do think
on that topic. I mean, sorry. On that topic though, like I think that putting the autonomy of your survival in your own hands, I think I like that. Like, I mean, Titles is saying that healer, it's good. It's more, you want more autonomy or more control from the healer aspect. But like, if I'm a pug experience or even in high keys, I hate like thinking like, oh crap, Toll didn't hit this ability, so I died. Like, I'm punished from like another person's play. Whereas like I see from the tank perspective, right? Like a lot of my survivability depends on my own gameplay. Yes, I can call for like externals, but being able to outplay it, it feels good to me.
I will say, from a tank, like as somebody who plays with tanks, I think that the seasons are better whenever tanks are strong. I genuinely think that, especially in like 5-mans, tanks really shouldn't need that much interference from a healer. I think that they should be mostly self-sufficient. It becomes a problem whenever your DPS and your healer are too strong because it becomes press a defensive or die, as opposed to there is any outplay potential for the healer to be able to heal you up. Because right now healers are mostly like maintenance mode healers. You do notice a little bit of the difference between Mistweaver has insane single target healing and spot healing, but more often than not, a lot of the healers kind of feel the same, assuming that you're able to live. And so it's like, it kind of creates a weird paradigm, I think.
Yeah, this is a huge one-shot season. Like everything one-shots us 27 keys and beyond. And like, it's pretty obvious that there's huge disparities in the amount of defenses that a lot of classes have. Like Boomkin is probably the most egregious example where they have their only option is pretty much bear form to live every single mechanic. Whereas you look at Fire Mage and it has actually 7 defensives that they could press spread out there in a counter.
And I think the problem is like the classes across the game in general have been given too much, and so like the only way that they can kill you is by one-shotting you.
Yeah, I think there's no. It's no coincidence that the specs that are among the most popular so far this season have been Og, which is indestructible, Demo Lock, which is indestructible, Havoc, which is indestructible, Mage is now ramping in popularity, which is indestructible, Outlaw Rogue, which is, I think the least indestructible of these.
China loves Outlaw. I think that's not just like not an NA region pick. That is like some of the Chinese teams will fucking love Outlaw.
That historically has been often true when you look over at the comps. That it's like Outlaw and MM Hunter actually for the longest time were the ones that you would see over on the Asian servers, like a huge extra.
They also love Ret Paladin. God knows.
Yeah, which Ret did get buffed this week. We had some class tuning. Ret did get a 3% all ability damage increase. So
I love the 3% buffs. That's the good old. I don't know what this class needs, but let's give it a 3% kind of thing.
And then Mage got this. Just huge buffs.
What'd you guys think about the class tuning?
It doesn't apply to my class because I don't think Warrior has had tuning like in any of these nodes for like the last 5-6 tuning patches.
Did you talk to them recently? Why didn't you bring this up?
Okay, in my interview with them, I talked to them about tuning, and they said, "Oh, so we should nerf Warrior." So I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna shut up."
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of classes that are in a pretty good place right now, a lot of specs that are in a pretty good place, and I'm glad that they're still doing tuning as well. Like I think most of these changes are good. I will say the Mage ones do worry me a little bit for M+, though.
It's just awkward for Mythic Plus, right? Because Mage was already good in 5-mans, but you look at their raid performance and they sucked. So it's like, what are you actually supposed to do? And then buffing a spec like Fire, now they're playing the Ignite build, and it's like, okay, so you actually just buffed all their AoE from a spec that was already good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, in raid tuning, right? Like, there's classes that are always gonna suck in raid, but if you can kill the end boss with like whatever, do you really need to tune it if it's always represented? And I understand that mages are represented because they bring a raid buff, right? Not necessarily that they are doing like high enough damage to compete, right? But was it necessary to tune when it was still playable, in your guys' opinion? Because like I didn't see a need for any of this like Arcane Fire Frost tuning, wherein there are other specs that were maybe doing like worse in certain circumstances, and you still always kind of wanted to bring a mage because they brought a raid buff.
Yeah,
I mean, you were never playing a second, right? And you were heavily punished for playing a second.
Yeah, exactly.
But like,
right? You'd always, but you still have to play the first one, right? Even if their damage was worse than it used to be, you still would.
You know what's funny? That Ellie Shaman 50% earthquake damage buff is actually like 2% of their AoE.
Does this not change the rotation enough to actually make them press it more? Because I know they used to like not be pressing it.
I think they're pressing it a little bit more, but I think it's only like a 2% AoE buff or some shit.
That sucks. That's yeah.
I don't know. Class balance is.
I just find it hard for raid tuning
I've seen
to
worse.
go well when it's like the talent trees are the same things that are applied to both raid and Mythic Plus, and in such different situations. It's like so many classes have this thing where, like Fire Mage, all their damage comes from their single target. Havoc's kind of the same way, except they have like this branch coming out of their damage profile called Chaos Strike that's just pure single target, right? But like Fire Mage, every single thing comes from Pyroblast and just affects all their AoE. So buffing it affects everything. Whereas some specs don't have that. So it's really hard for them to balance both raid and plus at the same time, I feel like. And we've talked about that a bunch, but I feel like they have to separate it somehow for it to be really balanced.
This is one of the bigger disconnects I've seen in a bit. This one and like the 6% Destro buff that one time that we had in Sepulchre, where you're just like, hold on, wait, what are we doing here? Hold on, go back.
The rich get richer.
Yeah, I think that the mage spot is interesting, and I do empathize with like, especially the way that Ignite works on Fire. It's just hard to buff it in M+ without buffing, or buff it in Raid without buffing it in M+, right? Like that's a very difficult task that kind of would require them to do some reworking probably to actually accomplish that. So I empathize.
Yeah.
All right. We also got the WoW 2024 roadmap just came out, and there's big news about when the expansion might be, which it looks like it's actually maybe going to come out in summer. That's right. Cataclysm Classic is currently slated to land inside the summer time slot of 2024, alongside a bunch of new level cap increases for Season of Discovery and more. But there's also a retail one.
Pika, how do you feel about Season of Discovery?
Oh yeah, I've been spending so many hours watching Season of Discovery and BFD and people. Okay, the interesting thing about actual Season of Discovery is how there are so many different classes that can tank and how many different classes that can heal, and the community actually took it like really well. Like they really enjoy that aspect, is that they can just make a group no matter like whoever they're playing with, because somebody can always tank and somebody can always heal, and it kind of played into like the Final Fantasy theme of like if you have 5 people, no matter what, you can kind of do something, right? Because like somebody can play tank and somebody can play healer.
Yeah, I
That's pretty
think
cool,
that's
yeah.
cool. I kind of like the ideas of like shaman tanking and, mage healing or whatever are really interesting, and I think it's cool. So we also did get the retail roadmap as well, which shows that the retail expansion has also crept just on the left side of the summer to autumn
So what do we-
divider here. So, which initially it was announced as fall 2024, but it looks like it's been maybe brought up a little bit. Maybe we're getting it a little bit sooner than we were previously told.
Makes me think September, August, right?
Yeah, I think late August, early September maybe would be where I'd expect from this placement on the roadmap. Which
Alpha
That'd be awesome.
and beta are starting up soon though, which is thank God. Like
yeah,
I'm
I
so
really like that they have alpha and beta markers on that map. That's awesome.
and alpha is still after 10.2.6 and after 10.2.5. 10.2.5 isn't yet, and isn't at least for a couple weeks probably, right? So it needs to be, apparently 10.2.5 needs to be before January 19th or something, because that's when the Outland Cup is scheduled on the calendar. So it's like early to mid January is 10.2.5, and then what, like mid February 10.2.6 or something, and then
Yeah.
within alpha like late February or early March or something.
which makes sense. I think
which
I
does
think
make
that
sense.
with this timeline of it, I mean that's when Shadowlands Alpha came out, or Shadowlands came out in September, and the alpha started around that time as well. It was like early March, late February.
What do you guys think about this time running pandemonium slot on this? I know there's been a lot of
Okay.
speculation about what this might mean.
So, dude, I saw your YouTube video and it had like that circled. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I heard it was about Pandaland, maybe challenge modes.
So there's a Wowhead speculation post as well about this, but yeah, the word pandemonium normally has an E in it, and this one doesn't. So they've emphasized panda in there, which makes you think, mop. And it's time running instead of time walking, so maybe it's a speed running type thing, maybe like challenge modes.
So challenge mode, time
yeah.
walking.
And
be
also maybe it's time to bring back they haven't done the mop time walking raid, which is the next expansion up for getting a time walking raid. So I don't know. There's been a lot of different speculation about what it might be, but I think some kind of challenge mode running thing might make sense. There was a Wowhead speculation post that they made, and then they tweeted about it. And then Holly Longdale, vice president and executive producer for WoW, said, "Could it be even better than that?" Which was in response to this tweet that said, "What exactly is time running? Could it mean the return of challenge modes?" So, who knows? It could be any
a
number
different
of
game.
things.
It could be a different game mode, right, for Mythic Plus.
Could be.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, pretty much whatever it
Or if
is.
there's
I'm
like an
hyped.
MDI mode for M+. There's like, we have like
Honestly,
Great Push mode, which we have on live right now, and then they're adding like an MDI-esque alternate mode to play. That'd be sweet.
I will say historically though, like the casual modes, people will play them for like a week, but then they kind of run out of steam. I kind of think about like Legion time walking, Mythic Plus is kind of one of those things. I do worry a little bit that this might not hit if it's a time walking esque event.
yeah. Pretty much whatever that is, I'm hyped for it. That looks cool.
I'm down,
We
I'm down to
also-
try it though. Yeah.
We know there's going to be a faded, although it's not called faded. They haven't called it faded. They haven't used that word at all, so I expect it'll be. I kind of think that because people hear the word faded, and it seems like all the comments about faded are negative now. I think they'll just pick a different word for it to
Call it
dodge that
this-
perception.
Call it dinar raids. Then
Dinar
everyone will be
raids.
happy, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone loves the dinar.
Pika, what do you think about faded in general? I think a lot of people would like to misrepresent the argument, being like, we're not getting the expansion sooner because we're getting faded. What do you kind of think about it?
I mean, I think I personally don't like faded in terms of you asking me to rerun the raids I just ran, because one is like I usually do like a weak aura clutter, which destroy after each raid
True.
tier, and then now you got to go and find those old things, and you're basically doing the same thing, but now it's even more annoying. Like some of the fights, like Echo Maltharian, which is already kind of annoying because of weak auras, and now you're adding like some other faded affix to make it even more annoying. It's like we didn't have enough of it. And it's like sometimes it's really good, right? Like some of the faded affixes were like, oh, makes it faster, makes it easier, and then some were like, oh, makes it even like so much more worse. Like to me, I would love faded in terms of let's do a faded, I don't know, like a faded Karazhan, right? Like a faded Black Temple. You know, like go bring us
Like
further
actual
back.
classic? Okay.
But like bring us back to that, rework the fights or whatever, however you wanted to. But you can reuse old content, but use it at a distance that like I don't remember it. Like, you know, like maybe like allow people to do Cataclysm raids, right? But like up it, obviously make the fights like a little bit harder. Don't make them Tindril. I don't want to be freaking dodging fire gleams in like Firelands. But like, you know, you like make it more fresh, but make it fresh because you haven't done it in forever, as opposed to faded raids of something I just did from the same expansion, which just makes me feel like I'm wasting time. And even my own guild is like, so how soon into the faded raids are we just gonna break?
We take
You
a
know,
break.
like we're gonna
yeah.
clear once and then just not do it. Because
Yeah.
from a Mythic Plus perspective, I want to clear the raids because that's how I get the gear I need for Mythic Plus. And if my guild's gonna take a break, well, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't have that opportunity to like, oh well, should I just go and join another guild for a faded season and come back? Like I don't think anyone enjoys that aspect of it.
Yeah, farm is going to be a difficult thing to do there. I suspect for us, it's going to be like, I guess we'll try and find Fyrak mount sales each week, and we'll do those, and then like clear up the faded raid a little bit the rest of the week until like the rest of the day, and try and just be done one day each week or something. I don't know. Like it's
just not fun. I think that's the thing. It's just not fun.
Yeah, I do wish they would. I was hoping they would do something that wasn't just the Dragonflight raids, that would go back to old expansions in that slot, because like you said, we have just done all the Dragonflight raids so much. I will say, if this is as soon as early spring, I might not be done with it. Like, there might be more Amir Drasil left in me, because that will still have only just been out for a few months, right? But I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to Razageth, right? Like, that sounds icky to me. Even going back to Sarkaret, the both of those sound like I'd rather leave them. Hopefully they come up with a more interesting way of spicing them up than they did last time as well. Like, you remember those little interrupt ads and the purge dispel thing and stuff. Like, I hope they have a new take on spicing them up than the faded affixes.
All right, guys, we're getting blown back by the Razageth winds. Here come the soaks. Good luck.
Oh God! Or you know those you each spawn those ads that needed like 4 CCs each, right? And those spawn in addition to the other CC needing affix ads. Oh no!
Just do something easy. But bring back like, you know, encrypted or whatever, where you can get like cooldown reduction or like all those that from the Mythic Plus season. Put that in, and then it's more fun. Whatever makes the raids easier to clear rather than harder to clear makes it better. In that
Let me cook. They actually put, so whenever you have to go back to Vault of the Incarnates, you get Thundering in the raid.
Oh my god.
Love it.
That would be so much immense pain.
Yeah, Thundering, I think,
and 5% boss health. 5% boss health as well.
I think Thundering really did need more than 5 people to be affected by it, right? I think 20 people getting it would be a lot better. And I think as well, instead of there being 2 marks, there should be like 4, and you have to stack up with people of all 4 for them to go away.
Combine Thundering and Star Augur. Best mechanic ever.
Exactly. That's
Dude,
the mechanic that we want.
Imagine you just don't get like you get the opposite mark as the people on the opposite Razageth platform as you, and you just get stunned. I guess you didn't get stunned if they were more than 100 yards away, right? So that wouldn't work, but that would be good. All right, well, those horrifying ideas out of the way, I guess we can move on a little bit to talking about one of your specialties, Vika, and one of the things that I think we've talked to you a little bit about in some of the previous episodes, but obviously you're known for being, Prot Warrior expert. And one of the things we wanted to talk with you about was the idea of around like multi-class tanking, re-rolling versus like sticking with something that is a specialty, right? Something that is more niche, like the Prot Warrior is, and how you kind of make those decisions. So, what is your like thought process on whether you're playing Prot Warrior this season or Pally or DH or whatever, or Guardian Druid last season, right? How do you decide that for yourself?
I just want to say, first off, that I never rerolled Fodom classes until I met Trell. So that's that. Like before Trell joined my guild, I was always just the Prot Warrior. And then Trell joined the guild. Like he's like, oh, you gotta play Fodom. It's more important. I'm like, okay, I'll dabble, and we talk, and like that's the reason why. So he's the problem, for everybody out there. He is the Fodom reroller that is always in your ear whispering. But I mean, it's an interesting topic to kind of talk about, right? Because you go against like you have to always balance between what is the most optimal and what are you having the most fun with, right? And then that's like kind of what you're always like internally struggling with. Obviously, they can coincide. Like some people enjoy things just being easier and being more efficient, so you can just play Fodom for that reason, right? But it doesn't mean that if you play like Prot Warrior, you play the Guardian, you play the Blood Decay out there, that you can't do the similar content at a relative scale as the most meta tanks, right? For instance, my experience in this expansion this season specifically, is that Prot Warrior is actually very, very good. And it's very good because it's tanky. And if the tank was not tanky, then yeah, you're shit out of luck. Like doesn't matter what you do, like you can't do your role. But if you're tanky, then it's just about your utility and like making things easier for the group. So if your group just plays better, you can play any tank, right? It just leaves less room for error. And that's how we kind of like go through our thought process whenever we're attempting high keys now. And like I can like talk a little bit about that, right? Because we talk about it like every single night on how are we going to approach this? We don't have a Prot Pally, but how can we mimic similar things to a Prot Pally? How can we mimic similar things to Silent Sigil? And like we've been able to do that this season with like the toolkits that are in our class trees, right? Like for instance, I don't have Silent Sigil, but I have Disrupting Shout. It's a poor man's Silent Sigil, but it effectively can do the same thing for what the purposes that you need in terms of like grouping and making sure you have like a CC chain going on before the mobs die. And if I'm like a paladin, like okay, well they bring the 1 minute sack. How can I replicate that? Is there something I can replicate using Intervene? Well, no, Intervene kind of blows this season. But right now we found a solution in a trinket from Everbloom, right? Like the shield trinket off Everbloom with mastery and puts like a little bubble on people. It's just a leaf, right? And like now I have a 1 minute sack essentially. It's not as good as sack because it's not a straight DR, but it allows like healers or like the people who need it at a certain time to live. And I'm just a Prot Warrior playing a healer trinket.
Hold on, you're wearing the leaf. You're wearing.
Yeah, I'm wearing the leaf. Yeah, I'm wearing. We experimented with it yesterday, and it's very good in a lot of situations, right? Because when my team doesn't have a DR, rallying cry is not going to make the difference. Like the leaf will to like a 1% live, and that's how I can become a poor man's Prot Paladin, right? Because right now damage, in my opinion, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right, to time these keys is survivability strictly, unless you're talking about like maybe like Rise. Like Rise is like I'd say the only one with like a tight enough timer that you should think about where can you like push a little bit of DPS through. But other than that, like survivability is super key.
I mean, you see DPS players wearing the tank trinket from Farak, and honestly, I would wear that leaf until I get the tank trinket. As a Havoc player, I would wear it so I could external people.
I'm wearing that leaf on my AUG, and it is great trinket.
It's just about solving the right problems. Like this season's all about one shots, so Pika's making a really good choice by wearing that.
Joe doesn't say that often, by the way. That's a recent thing.
That's only on the podcast thing. Once the camera's off, he's back to being super mean. Yeah, it's
no. Pika's gone from being a purely offensive-minded player to a well-rounded defensive player.
Yeah,
I'm still I'll stance like 90% of the time though.
Whenever you're looking at like PTR or beta cycles, how are you like assessing the tanks? Because I feel like that's the time where I see, honestly, all three of you guys playing just a bunch of weird shit. And I just somebody will invite me to keys and I'll zone in. Somebody's on a Guardian Druid, and I'm like, why are we playing this?
For me, perspectively, I always start targeting the tanks that I enjoy. Right,
Okay.
I want to see what they can pump out of and where they can have unique solutions to everything. So, for instance, like everybody, I think, came into the cycle knowing that Prot Warrior is going to be very strong in Waycrest.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone knew from previous expansions that Prot Warrior is very strong at Waycrest, but uniquely, they are strong in Waycrest, but that's not the strongest tank in Waycrest. Optimally, I think Paladin is, right? Because Thorns. Like, you need to survive the Thorns. How do you do it? Sack and Bop, right? So that's a very interesting thing to realize through high keys. But that's something that we can kind of experience through the PTR cycle, right? You want to bring every tank into every single key so that you can be like, oh, this is really cool, or this is really interesting, and like, how do I live this versus something else? And you don't really get that experience when you're on retail, because one, you're not going to get invited to the high keys if you're an off-meta tank, because the meta, is pretty established very early on, and also like you don't have time to like wipe and go again, because a lot of people, they don't want to waste their time on retail or on live keys to like, oh, let me experiment, let me cook, right? But in PTR, like, oh, let's pull this like 20, 30 times. Let's die like 100 times, because it really doesn't matter, because we're actually really trying to experience. Like, for the first time, like I experienced, right, in a Blood Decay, like recently, that Chromie, her Sandblast is actually physical. Like, I actually didn't realize that until
it is?
I just got one shot with my Blood Decay yesterday.
Wait,
right?
I didn't realize it's fizz either. What?
Yeah, because I would AMS it, and I'd be like, oh, perfect. It's a bolt from a mage flying at me, and I just get one shot, right? And I'm like, huh. And then also, why didn't I realize this? Because my warrior, I use nothing, and I'm fine, right? And it's a magic bolt. If that's a magic bolt hitting me, and I'm not even using Spell Reflect, then I'm just getting owned. Right, so like some things like that are very interesting to find out, and is strictly something you can find out usually on PTR, because you're just not going to be in that situation on retail.
I think that's the biggest reason to play multiple classes and new content, is just to like throw your toolkit at things and see what works, and it just teaches you so much on different classes. Like, somehow someone figured out that you could just fear the root mechanic on the slime boss and Galakron's
Lighted
Fall.
Galakron, yeah.
You can just fear that root off for some reason. You can't stun it, but you can fear it. So like somebody on some class that has a fear pressed it at some point, and it was like, oh, that worked. So now everyone knows.
It's not even just a fear. It's like every CC that's not a stun, pretty much.
The disorient, any kind of like disorientation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Weird. I didn't know about that one. That's cool though.
So what happens if you don't want to play PTR cycles? Do you just rip it? Do you just like play multiple tanks at the beginning of a patch and just kind of decide what you find fun, or maybe?
I don't think you should go down that route. Honestly, I think like this kind of goes back to your question about like fodder me rolling, right? And I think you should play a tank that you enjoy and you love the most, more so than like anything, because in general circumstances, you can do the same amount of content unless like you're the 1%, right? Like, you can do like the 29s, but you may not be able to do that 30, just because, it's that one tick higher that caused your entire team to die because you don't have sack, right? You're like, there's one tick higher that you couldn't do this, because there's always a solution, at least that I have found playing other tanks, if you enjoy the game. And it's always better to be like a 80%, 90% proficient tank as like whatever tank that you like a 80%, 90 percentile Prot Warrior versus like a 20 percentile like VDH. An exception, I would say, is last season with like Guardian Druid. I feel like you could have been any percentile version of Guardian Druid, and it would be like way better than any other tank. But like this season, especially, I feel like I could play almost any tank and be fine. And you can kind of see that in the leaderboards, right? Because yes, you would see a majority of VDHs, you see a majority of Prot Paladins at the highest scope, but you do see the one like Blood Decay, the one Druid, the one Brewmaster. Like, yeah, you do see that, and that means it's possible. Right, and that's all that really matters, is that that it's possible, and not that it's like impossible.
You know what's crazy? 2 tanks is normally like great meta for tanking too.
That's true.
Any meta that's not just one singular tank, that's a great meta for tanking.
The tank and healer balance both this season is pretty good. It's like there's only like one key outlier, like Pika said, one key higher is like where you need to be meta, but everybody else can do the one lower level.
Yeah, which is fine for most people.
Yeah, I think I think as well, if you're signing up to be, so one thing to note is like if you're signing up to be the Vengeance Demon Hunter or the Prot Pally, there's going to be a lot of content and videos and strategies that people will know about for how to make your spec do the things, right? Like if you want to be a Prot Pally in Waycrest, you can watch Yoda go do his Waycrest or whatever, and you can copy all the things like those builds and stuff. You can watch, Echo or whatever now go do these things. You can watch Dorky do them, right, as Vengeance or Prot Pally. But if you want to do it as a Prot Warrior, it is going to require more of that, yourself thinking about, okay, how are we going to do the same thing that the Sigil of Silence did, right? How are we going to do that? I'm not going to have a VOD of that necessarily unless I, go and get Pika's VOD, right? And that is a resource for Prot Warriors in some of these dungeons, right? But like that's, I think one of the big things about if you're trying to do high content on one of the off meta things is you do need to actually think about it, right? And I think the biggest part as well is if you can come up with something where you have a strength that the other tanks don't have and actually find a way to use that as a time save, which I don't know if there's, I guess Prot Warrior, the biggest one is like Spell Reflects and Waycrest this time around, but there are some other,
for instance,
yeah,
like for instance, like I think the biggest realization for me, always going from like, because I play Prot Warrior always at the start, right? Because I raid as Warrior, so I'm always playing Prot Warrior and figuring out things on my own, and then going to like the meta text, for instance, just to mess around with like on my off time. And the biggest thing I realized is always like, wait, this is a tank buster, does damage, and then Trell always goes, how do you not know that? Like this is like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, like to 1 month, 2 months into the season, and I'm like, that kills people because like as a Prot Warrior, you're so strong against physical damage. Like nothing is gonna really kill you if it's a physical tank buster. But then I'll go on like Prot Paladin and I'm like, wait, I cheated. Wait, what? I don't even know what just hit me, and I had to read the journal because like that's actually an ability that hit me that I didn't even realize. That's something that you'll see all the time. Again, like Morchi's Sandbolt, like the tree in Waycrest, right? Like I didn't realize that was a like difficult tank fight, right? But like when you have to play pretty optimally when you're playing Prot Paladin or another tank because you're just getting smashed, whereas Warrior you're just like,
Yeah,
man, is the healer gonna like not be able to heal this many stacks off of the tree? Like I'm fine, I can go to like 70 stacks, but I have to reset because at 24, anything past that guy's just dying.
I think that a point that you made, Dratnos, and I think Trell probably is the person who's the most adept at talking about this, is like, it's not even just about your tank either, right? But it's also about like the rest of your composition for the utility that they're providing whenever you're actually doing a dungeon. Like, how do you route a key? Because like the tank is almost always responsible for routing the dungeon, executing the dungeon. I think the tank, obviously, for anybody who's paying attention to Mythic Plus, has by far the largest burden for actually executing the key. Like, how are you supposed to even design routes if you, let's say you're not playing something that's like the most meta, but it's like, marginal, like you're not going to have a bad time. Like how do you design strats or routes around that?
I mean, Pika and I both we've been playing together a lot, obviously, but we both kind of just combine ideas a lot of times, and we pick like the most efficient route first and foremost, and then try to emulate that with our off-meta comp and whatever comp we're playing. And then usually we can make it work in some way or another. Like we adapted this Darkheart route yesterday that has like 7 shrouds in it, but we didn't have a rogue. So we just like gateway skipped and like ran out of bounds and stuff. Did all sorts of crazy stuff to skip all these packs and do the same pulls. And it worked out pretty well, but it was just like a science route because we don't even know if that's the fastest thing. But it's fun to put forth the creativity to do those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. And I think like from a tank perspective, I know a lot of people see like, oh, like how much like you're actually time you're putting into like keying, right? But there's a lot of more time. Like I probably majority of my time studying more than I'm actually playing when I'm doing this, right? Like I'm thinking about routes. Like I'm looking at who are the best guys, what are they currently doing? So I'm watching like EU streams, I'm watching like, NA streams, I'm watching Asian streams, and I'm trying to figure out like who has the best route strategy and how is that adaptable to whatever class or whatever thing I'm going to be doing. Like I asked like my team like, what keys did you get at the start of the week, right? On the Tuesday. They'll tell me, oh, I got this, I got this, I got this. Then on the Tuesday, when I'll go and look, okay, what is like Yoda doing this morning and how are they routing? And then how's Kira routing later that day, right? And then constantly thinking, okay, so they're making these slight adjustments, and then how am I going to put that all together into my route and like take a little bit of good from them, take a little bit of good of them, right? Because no matter what, your route is whatever is best for your team. It's not what is Like what Yoda's doing is not going to apply to what I'm doing. What Kira's doing is not going to. What even I'm doing is not going to apply to the majority of masses, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
You don't have that. You don't have that coordination. You don't have that classes. You don't have like that experience to do that kind of route in that certain way.
All right. We're going to talk today as well. Our second topic is going to be Dawn of the Infinite, Murozund's Rise. This is one of our. I guess I should have said this at some point near the top of the show, but we will also. Yeah, this is another one of our dungeon episodes, so we'll talk about Murozund's Rise. But first, we have our tip of the week segment, our favorite segment. My tip of the week is that the catalyzing machine works for old tier currently. So if you, for whatever reason, need to catalyze old tier, it's good for Mog, but it's also good for, if you're logging onto an alt and you have 4-piece and then you find a 483 item that's on one of those slots out of your vault that week. That happened to me on a lot of my characters. You can go and put that on and then just catalyze into old tier on whichever other off slot you had before, right? Whatever your off piece was before. And that way you can actually put on that 483 upgrade. And yeah, for a lot of alts, I think doing this is going to be good to let you maintain old 4-piece or move into 2-piece, that kind of stuff for a while. And then also you can use this to get a lot of old Mog as well, for, I guess, any of these patches that have had the Catalyst out. This will work, and I wonder if at some point they'll bring this back and let you get all the old set bonuses and the older expansions with it too. That would be cool. All right, Trell, what is your tip of the week?
Well, that was a pretty useful tip. Good job, Darkness.
Thank you.
That's mine's about Razan. So there's a bunch of old tech with Razan that I figured one of us should probably share at some point from BFA, and it still all works because that dungeon is mostly unchanged. But Razan has like a couple of weird things where if anyone presses Shadow Meld during his pursuit,
Yeah.
whoever's being pursued just it stops. Like no matter who presses Shadow Meld, you could rotate him throughout the course of the fight. It works every time. If the person who has the pursuit on them has something like Feign or Vanish, or is there another one? Invis, Mage Invis.
Yeah.
They can also do that for themselves, but Shadow Meld's the only global one.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, you have to explain that to people like 5 times if you're trying to get them to do this in a pug, right? It's like, no. Just, you can press Shadow Meld even if I'm being fixated and it will stop the fixate, which is it's so bizarre.
Yeah, you're like, just press it. Just watch. I can't explain.
Yeah.
And there's also another thing on Razan where the way he picks his target for the pursuit is based on having 2 available targets at range. So if you have 3 people standing in the middle of his hitbox, like strictly in melee range, then they should be ineligible for the pursuit.
Yeah.
As long as there's 2 others outside. So you can have like your healer and your AUG player do that. It's probably most optimal.
Then it 50-50s those people, right? So yeah, I guess healer and AUG is probably optimal this season. But I there's also situations where like if you have a hunter, they're going to bait every single time. So it kind of depends on your comp.
Yeah, hunter obviously can just feign every single time. That's really good.
If your tank is sweating the bleed, God forbid you don't have an AUG evoker and your tank is sweating the bleed, the tank and the healer can go out and you can actually just kite it every single time if you want.
That's a good point. I should mention, if you do this, if you drop the pursuit every single time, the tank takes, I think, double the bleeds throughout the fight. Because he will do 2 per cycle instead of 1. Is that right, Pika?
It's not exactly 2. It's not 2 per cycle. But you have your CD rotation becomes a lot more strict, right?
Yeah.
Because like
The
he
cycles are
make it so
shorter.
that instead of like 30 seconds between, or like a minute 30 or whatever per second every time between each bleed, you'll have like only like 45 seconds or like a minute. So it's not exactly like 2 per. You don't get 2 bleeds in a cycle, but they come so much more often that you need to have a better plan to deal with it, rather than if you don't have an AUG, just let it run so that you cannot die.
So this is a bit tricky if you don't have an AUG, because AUG can caught every other, even if you're melding every single one of them, right? The AUG can caught every other, but if you don't have an AUG, then your tank needs to really be a beast sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Pika, what is your tip of the week?
My tip of the week kind of talks about a little bit what we talked about before, is that this season specifically, if you're into Mythic Plus, don't focus so much on your damage. Focus on things that help your team live. A great example of this is the Leaf of the Protector out of the Everblue. Only healers can, or people with healer offs can get this trinket, but I could see a meta where all 5 people are wearing this for a certain key to make sure people live. right? It is not only a small little shield that helps people live one shots. It also adds versatility for damage for someone like I don't know, like a warlock, for instance, where versatility is their best stat. So think about how you can work cohesively as a team. Things like this, things like Farrak Trinket, like the Tainted Heart to survive, and that's what's going to get you to time the high keys. Not having Signet Brand on 5 players is not going to help you with like getting one shot by any other tank mechanic.
And just for the viewers as well, like that trinket is about a 380k shield at like 376 item level ish, like 382 ish. It's gonna be about a 400k shield.
Plus
also
the burst DR.
The verse DR is about 12% damage, 6% DR. Whenever the shield gets broken. So
Yeah.
Also, the cheat death trinket, honorable mention. Trade that to your DPS you play with all the time that dies a lot.
Yeah, that thing. Echo was using that on Tindral Prog for much of the first few hundred pulls of Tindral Prog on a lot of players.
So did we. Me
yeah.
and Pika and I think 2 others used it for like first 100 pulls at least.
I would wear that. I would wear the Farrak tank trinket, right? Like if I had the choice of all the trinkets on my Augovoker, I'd probably wear Borrelios and that Farrak tank trinket. That would be my 2 picks on my Augovoker, which is like crazy because all I'm trying to do is live, and that's your main job in Mythic Plus right now.
All right, Tuttles, what are we looking at in this clip of the week from old Yumi TV?
So, a lot of people have been re-rolling Mistweaver lately as it's been seeing a lot more popular play. And there's this nice immersion that you really have to get into whenever you're playing a Mistweaver Monk. I really feel like we don't see this too often with Monk players. I know that Trell abandons Monk, and he's definitely not immersed with the class, but I think Growl is doing a great job. And every single time he presses Spinning Crane Kick, he's just making sure to spin his camera as fast as possible. He's manually spinning that camera, by the way.
That's manual? Oh my god, he must have ridiculously low sensitivity.
Not manual.
You should tell people that's manual. look, just pressing it over and over again.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Apparently it's a weak aura. Like, who designed a weak aura for this?
That is so
I don't
good.
know how you make a weak aura do that, but that's awesome. I gotta get that next time I play Monk.
I can't believe it. That is amazing. Oh wow. All right, let's move on to talk about Murozund's Rise, which you were describing this, Pika, as the one that's like the only DPS check dungeon in the pool, basically, right? Is that fair, you think?
I think it's like DPS check, not in terms of like if you don't have DPS you die, like you're not gonna break the shield so you die, like in the last boss of Fall, but rather it's a tight timer. All the other dungeons, if you route okay and you don't die, you're like a good all the way up to like 30 plus, right? But Rise is something where you feel the pressure of the timer, even like starting at like 26, I would say, like 26, 27, you feel the timer. You may have like a pretty, like obviously not a perfectly clean run, but you will still feel like, oh, I only have this much time left, right? Unless you're cheesing, right? Like with all the different cheeses the last couple of weeks, like imagine like you felt you had to cheese in order to time this key on like 27 or like 28. That's like how people felt about it, right? Whereas other keys, people are using 27, 28 as their warm-up key. Like that's how different it feels.
I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that this is actually like one of the bigger damage checks, and it's more of like a boss rush style dungeon. And we're also doing such like high keys and scalings back at 10% and stuff like that, to where like it's just a compounding thing where this dungeon is gonna it continues to get hard. Like 27 is hard, and you're like, you zone to 28, and you're like, this is impossible.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so diving into a little bit, where do you guys like to activate Bloodlust in this dungeon? I think that's always a good place to kind of start when we're talking about advice for people looking at a key. And I guess
first pull with Spurlock, right? I'm pretty sure that's standard, yeah.
Actually, it depends, right? So there are a couple of different routes on how you can route this place, and it depends on what your goal is, right? Some people actually go, okay, this is obviously a lot of the tech comes from when it was buggy, like and you could exploit it. But some people would go straight to Maiden, pull Maiden solo, and just get her out of the way, right? Lust, get her out of the way, and then you could basically pull the entire platform all together if you really could control it, because it really wouldn't matter, right? Because everything is either dodgeable or like you can deal with it in some manner. But Maiden was just something that was just, it felt unfair, right? Because like it just did so much damage. If you pulled her with anything, it got so complicated with the orbs. And then we were on a bolstering week last week that you didn't want to kill anything with her either, because if you did, that will definitely sign your death warrant, right? So like you can either, in my opinion, you want to use Bloodlust in either a very large Spurlock pull, or find a way to go to Maiden and get rid of her first, whether it's with trash or without, depending on its bolstering or not.
And something that Pika actually mentioned, but he kind of glossed over, Maiden, she does damage to the mobs that are around her. So that orb that she shoots out, if it contacts the mobs, it's basically any mob that can be stunned by her orb can take damage from that orb.
Including a healer that's not paying attention.
Yeah.
Your local Ogvoker can also die to it as well.
Okay, and so lusting a trash pull here, is that true even on Tyran? Are you guys lusting trash in this area also and not sending it on tier?
It's 35 minute timer,
yeah.
right?
I think so. Yeah, I think we send it because on Tyrannical we were sending it on. No, did we send it on tier? Trial? I don't remember.
It feels like so long ago, even though it was 2 weeks ago. But I feel like you still send it on first pull because I think you lose a lust.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? 35-minute timer means you only have like 4 minutes of holding lust in the whole dungeon, right? So if you use all of that here, you're just gonna miss out on one of those lusts. So yeah. Keeper tier though, nasty boss as well, right? Like especially with the bugs fixed, you have a long and dangerous fight ahead of you on that one, especially on Tyran.
Yeah, the only tips I could say for tier, because I mean, it's, as a fight on its own, it's actually really simple, right? There's only like 3 different mechanics that the boss kind of like 4 different like moves it does, and other than that, it's kind of like a target dummy. And none of the moves are like, oh, this is like a one shot your whole team. The problem with tier is he's long. He's like a very long boss fight because he's got like 2 to 3 intermission phases that also take time, which then he gets a shield from. And the only way you can kind of save time, I would say, as a new player coming into it, which we kind of figured out like pretty early on, was drag tier towards the center of the room so that you're like during the intermission, so melee can have full uptime of the boss while collecting orbs. Or else, if you put it off to the side or something like that, melee are just collecting orbs and not going to be hitting the boss the whole time.
Yeah, it actually makes a big difference because I can hit the boss the entire time while I soak 5 orbs as a Demon Hunter player, and it probably shaves off like a good 10% of the encounter just by that alone. So you want to like drag the boss to the middle 3 or 4 seconds before intermission.
And I mean the boss. Okay, so if you have bigwigs, the boss, the mechanics that bigwigs are telling you is actually correct. It might be a bit wonky at the very beginning because the boss can queue into like different combinations of like what are you going to get double of. But once it figures out what the combination is going to be, it is going to be consistent. And so you can kind of, if you're not getting double pizza slice, for example, you can, I don't want to say pre-move the boss, but you can, move the boss a little bit closer to the Oath Stone at least.
Yeah, I mean, you have enough time after the last whatever, no matter what ability it is, as long as you're not like right at the edge of the platform to bring it in. I like to use that inner ring as a good place to kind of place the boss from, and then always have your DPS and your healer always stand out on the outer ring, so they bait outwards. And then also like my tank frontals, I have 2 choices. One, I can make a line like from away from my team, but never towards the center, or push it back right into the old sand like that you already created from the previous frontal.
Also, from a DPS perspective, do not stand out in the middle of the room. Like, stand next to the pillar and soak the orbs as they come into you. Don't try to, like, cover 30 yards of distance whenever you could cover, like, 5 yards of distance to get the exact same orbs.
Learn. Yeah.
Does Learn stand out at range like that?
Last time I played with Learn, he's like, there's a distance on that. He was like 30 yards like the other way, and he got hit by the tank because it's like almost like infinite range.
You're talking about the tank frontal. I'm talking about the orbs from the Oath Stone.
Oh, I didn't know that about the frontal. Interesting.
Yeah, the frontal is like infinite range.
I think it has unlimited range, yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
You can snipe a Moonkin with this tech, Dreadnought.
Love that.
You can snipe anybody with that tech.
That's a good Death's Advance boss, by the way. The Death's Advance ability on that knockback, very nice. One of the good.
Yeah, and I also think that I don't know how many exact orbs there are, but you should have enough coverage so that each of your DPS classes can get 5 orbs each. Yeah. And then I think it relies on something like your healer and your tank can get like 2 or 3 or something each. But always try to get even the Evoker, which is not really a real DPS. Even the Evoker, try to get 5 stacks of that orb on those 3 as the priority, and the tank and the healer should just feel as like the back. I think if you're playing like tennis, right? Let the DPS be on the front, and then you always just catch whatever's remaining that they missed.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I think the tank might be more valuable because you're still gonna get like 2 or 3 on like the healer other player.
Yeah, but you're not gonna like optimize that point. Like, oh, you should go get that. And the healers,
Well,
just like running across the room to get that one orb.
Listen, I was just saying, like, if you can, I think that the tank is probably better than the Aug Evoker. I'm not 100% sure on that though.
Yeah, I'm not sure either what scales better. I suspect it's close.
It's close.
I think the important thing is that never give the healers anything.
That's on God.
Yeah,
good comms.
5550 is
0.
the,
Actually 0. Yeah.
that's how I would divvy those orbs up.
So sometimes your healers will complain and say that they need the haste to be able to dispel or heal. That's a lie. They're making shit up.
Yeah,
they don't
that's a no could thing again. The electric boss or whatever.
Yeah.
The lightning boss, and they're like, I need orbs to heal, man. Just heal so that we can do DPS.
Can you please press one healing button, man?
All right, then there's the fun little gauntlet incident, and then the sand area.
So second lust is double dragons, but like that's standard. Okay.
Yeah, that's also a Tyran or fourth thing, and you definitely have to send this one right because you're so far away from the next boss that you just gotta click something here.
Yeah,
and then the sand area is really annoying. Very. Do you guys have any tips for dealing with the sand?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of misinformation about this sand area that even to this day, when I watch people's streams, even like some of the top Mythic Plusers in the world currently, I don't think they really understand how any of this like portal interaction works or like how anything is dealt with in this area. So there are 2 portal keepers. Okay, there's one at each, like 2 portal keepers that matter. Right? There's one that's siphoning into the left portal, and there's one siphoning into the right portal. Then you have the one, I think, that's running around the middle, and another one that's pacing back and forth through the left portal that you go through. But the only ones that matter are you need to kill the Rift Mage that are channeling each one of those portals. And after that Rift Mage is dead, you just need to have anybody in your party run up to that portal and then like back to the group, and it'll turn that portal on. Right, that is all you need to actually do in that whole area. And however you want to route about that, you can do 100 different ways, right? But like the only thing that matters in that area is killing the rift mage that's in front of that portal, and then having someone walk up to activate it. Then you can take either the left route or the right route, and you don't actually have to clear sand all the way to there. Like I was seeing different groups like, oh, we need to clear enough sand to get all the way up there. We need to kill all 4 of the mages in this area. It's like everyone has a tinfoil hat, and nobody knows exactly what they're doing. But it's like that's how they're building their routes in this whole area.
Yeah, so the summary is like I think we clear a path through the middle basically, and then we kind of cut left to the left portal and never clear a path to the right portal. So then we just like have somebody gate over or fly over, activate the right portal, and come back at some point. That's all you had to do.
Oh, you guys are going battlefield first?
No, actually, it differs. Like, we actually, we go Morchi now on. I think it differed for us on Fortified and Tyranna because we wanted our next lust to be either on the tank or we wanted it to be on like the boss, one of the bosses, right?
Yeah.
But I think right now our current route is going towards Morchi, and we still screwed up all the time. Where we're oh crap, we went to battlefield, but now we have to go back. But there's like a few different ways to do it. But there's actually a lot of interaction with this trash that I think people don't really fully also know how to deal with it, and it makes it a little bit scary, right? For instance, the big. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think in this dungeon people also way over prioritize AoE damage. I think that this dungeon is like really sneaky one target. Like it is the mini bosses at the very beginning are the most important thing. The anomaly lizard mobs here are the most important thing, or the rift mages. You're one targeting either of those. Then you're hitting the tank. Then you're hitting the mounted guy that drops the consecration. Then you're hitting bosses only. Like this dungeon, I swear to God, is like sneaky one target only. Like your AoE like does not matter.
3 target.
Yeah.
And right after the first boss, I guess the entire rest of the dungeon.
Yeah.
And a lot of the damage you take as a tank, at least in the tank perspective, is actually dodgeable. I know a lot of tanks in this key specifically complain about how crazily over amount of damage that they take, and like how do you deal with it. I think that's like one of the when the first 2 weeks that I came in, people were asking me like, Pika, how do you live Rise, right? Because of the amount of, I think it's 80% or something. Like I think Karasis did a analysis, like 80% of the entire dungeon is just pure magic damage that you're taking, and right, and that's like the hardest thing for all tanks, right? Like obviously Avenged Demon Hunter like a little bit better than like a Prot Warrior, for instance. But there's a lot of ways to just completely mitigate the damage. For instance, let's take that 2 Dragon Pull up at the top of this route, right? The tank frontal is rangeable, so like you can leap that, right? You can Wurnstone it, you can do it like the Lock Gate, right? And you can get out of range and take 0 damage, right? And then all you're really dealing with is the AoE damage of one of the dragons. Obviously, you don't want to do that every single time because you won't have the ability to dodge it every single time. But it is dodgeable. So whenever I don't have a cooldown, just like, guys, I'm leaping this one, so just like don't get hit by the frontal as I move it.
Yeah.
Right? Or the balloon from the dogs that are walking around, right? The big, I don't know what they are, the anomalies or whatever.
Anomalies, yeah.
Yeah. If you put a shield on you, big shout out again to that tank, that trinket I was talking
use
about
that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, if you put it on, you put a shield on you right before you take the balloon, it actually doesn't apply to you. So the healer just dispels the single one that's on your DPS, and it becomes like a no-brainer. Like that mob does nothing.
And that's sick for like Death Knight with like Umbilicus Shield or like a Death Strike Overshield, something like that. If they have an Overshield like at the perfect time, then they're able to just not get that balloon at all. And that's an insane amount of damage that you're saving on your whole entire party, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to I guess Morchi. Well, I think Morchi is kind of the standard way that most groups would go here, right? Like that's.
Do you want to talk about count, maybe? Like, how do you not hit like 120% enemy forces?
Sure, yeah. I mean, are we skipping like all the stuff before and after Morchi? Is that the idea?
Well, most of the count is actually usually done up to this point in the dungeon.
Yeah.
I think all the top teams are skipping everything possible after that portal room, right? Because the majority, I think it's 2, 6, 7 count, right? Which is about 80% of the dungeon count that you need should come from prior to all this. And then you find unique ways to skip all this rest of this trash because either 1, it is inefficient, 2, it is horrible and you're gonna die, or like 3, it's just very easy way. It's very easy to skip.
Yeah, you get like 13% count from the battlefield trash automatically, and then you get 7% from the final pack, I think.
I think you need like 79 coming out of the sand area, something like that.
Yeah, 79.9 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need about 80. And in addition to that, so the Morchi trash, there's a couple ways of skipping that. Obviously, Shroud is one of them. Mind Soothe is another. You can completely skip those guys with Soothe. The third is if you actually like jump the gap to that like triangle indented piece whenever the mini boss is on the other side, you can actually just completely omit it, and then you have to jump again. Alternatively, like your evoker can hover across and rescue somebody from that middle section all the way across the gap. Demon Hunters can jump all the way across.
Yeah, rescue a
as well.
3-seater mount, right? Like
Wurnstone.
the typical, yeah,
exactly. It's a bunch of stuff like that as a way to skip it.
Yeah, and by going
standard is
Morchi
Invis
first,
potions, but yeah.
And then going Morchi first is actually better in that regard because then if you can skip any of that trash, you can just use that one Invis pod and then one gate outwards the other way, right? And then when you're going into battlefield from the other way, you actually don't need to use a pod to like skip that trash. Like all those 9 worms or something like that, you just wait for a good pat and you just walk right through. And that's why people are choosing to go Morchi first, because it allows them to skip without having to use as many things to like skip in and out of the boss.
Okay, speaking of Morchi, how do you actually do that fight with especially when the 5 ads spawn? Is that as dangerous of a thing as it is in the Pug world in the high keys?
They nerfed it, right? It's not as bad anymore. Like if they run into time traps, it's like not the worst thing, especially if it's staggered, right? If it all happens at once, you're still gonna die. But if you stagger them, you can use the time traps effectively. But most high groups, what they're doing is you just stack up all together right before Familiar Faces comes out. And then as soon as Familiar Faces comes out, you use some kind of big AoE CC, whether that is Sigil of Fear, and then or like Mass Entanglement, Landslide, like 100 different ways to like stop the ads to make sure they don't move, and just deal with it every time the boss uses Familiar Faces and releases them from the CC.
Have you guys seen anyone do mass polymorph yet?
I've seen Blind. I haven't seen Mass Poly. Are people actually using that?
I can't believe no mage has done that yet. I cannot believe it. It's on their talent tree. They have so much insane utility on their tree. Yeah, you can just mass poly them forever.
I mean, well, what most groups do is like, I think Havoc Demon Hunter and Augovoker have been fairly standard, so it's been like Landslide into Fear Sigil because you need 2 because they're 45-second cadences, and then it's like if you're playing with a Vengeance, they can literally just go misery again.
Yeah.
Or it really just kind of depends on like what your healer option is. Healers sometimes have something. If you're playing with a mage, yeah, Mass Poly. AoE Blind is also great if you're playing with a rogue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think in a pug scenario, you would just want, like in a pug scenario, just have 1 or 2 CCs, like Imprison, like or like Blind or something like that. You don't need to like mass CC them all, and just like let the tank or let like 2 or 3 of them hit the time traps, and you're completely fine. Yes, it's a little bit more a pain in the butt, but having the coordination of high groups to do the mass CC is probably less likely going to happen in a pug scenario than when you're actually doing high keys.
What I try to do is I try to make sure that it's CC'd off of our Havoc Demon Hunter 10. Like that's the one that I really don't want to have to add on them is like the Havoc DH. And so like if I'm going to CC any of them, it's going to be off the DH, because if they're getting pushed, and this happens with almost all melee, but Havoc Demon Hunter is probably the worst one. If they're getting pushed off the boss, you are losing an insane amount of damage.
True. I think if I was tanking a pug, even a no voice, I would just say I could probably do it if I had my own AoE CC like Vengeance. I would just say, hey, drop these on this ping. I'll ping it, and then walk away, and then I would just take care of the mechanic for the rest of the fight.
Yeah.
But if you don't have something like that, then you probably just play it out, and just CC it 1.
All right, then sleeper difficult part of the fight is the tank you were saying as a fortified lust candidate.
Oh, you're talking about Battlefield now, yeah.
Yeah, over to the battlefield now. The tank though, and then also the chain heal and or heal and consecrate guy mounted rallying cry pull. Any tips you guys have for that section?
If you're doing a high key, pre-move the consecration on the 3-pack. That consecration, especially at like high, this might not be applicable to like all players, but at like a high level, the consecration will insta take you for about like 60% of your HP. And so if you're not pre-moving it, you're gonna get hit with the second hit and immediately die. And so you need to make sure that you were like ready. You need to make sure like every single time it's going off, you're ready. Now, if you're doing like a 17 or something like that, say you're watching this and you're doing 17, you probably don't have to do that. But like if you have aspirations of doing higher keys, make sure you're pre-moving the consecration. The tank, whenever you get the mortar on you, it's easily countered if you backpedal. Like, okay, I know it's like a real jank to even say this, but if you just backpedal straight backwards away, you're never getting hit by the mortar. You're always baiting the lines perfectly, and it's so free. But
I did that, and then I fell off the edge here. I don't know.
Don't do that. But
is there tech to avoid that if you're backpedaling?
You call for spell warding and then complain if you don't get it.
I see.
I've never tried backpedaling. Do they always spawn like exactly to your left and right?
If you're backpedaling permanently, yes.
Even the first one every time? I feel like
it can spawn to your front.
It's based off. I think it's based off of your whatever way you're looking at when it like snapshots you. So like maybe if you're looking left and then you turn right, it might look like it's not like on your left and right. But after that moment, it'll just follow. That's why sometimes it curves, right? It's because it's always based off where you're looking at that moment and snapshotting like at that second where your left and right are. And the only problem is like when you corner yourself or you put yourself against a wall, right? So you never. I don't think you ever want to like be on an edge. But I think you can bait it in such a way that if you like turn to the left or something like that, or turn to the right before it goes off, then you can create that maze for you. I don't know if that's 100% sure, but like I think that's how I've seen a lot of like the high end groups do it, is that they already know which way it's going to be going and bait it in that direction.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it worked like that. I'm always like flying around the screen, just terrified of it.
I mean, the alternative. Okay, so if you're not going to constantly backpedal, the alternative route is to wait until the mortar is dropped, right? Like the big red circle that's in the middle of the fire, and then like you should have one exit path, and then you turn and you run out of that exit path, and then you stand there and you wait for the fire to cover up your spot, and then mortar comes back out again, and there's going to be another exit path, and you're just going to run out of that one. That's another way you can do it, but so like if you don't want to constantly run backwards, I think constantly running backwards is more of like a healer or like a ranged thing. Like I think as a melee, you're probably not likely to do that. You're just like your priority is hitting the boss, right, or hitting the mini boss.
I think the scariest part, I don't know why it seems to mess people up a lot, is like the goblins that it shoots out. Like like people are really afraid of that. They think it's gonna like nuke them and one shot them, but it puts a dot that is healable as long as you only get like one stack of it, right? But I think like as a tank player especially, you should just be getting up into there and like trying to CC the ads, stun them, control them, and even if you're gonna take like 1 or 2 blowups, it's not the end of the world. Like hit a defensive and you'll be fine. But like I noticed that a lot of people just spread like they're running away as if it's like they have a bomb that's about to fly right into them.
I low key just like tank it, and then it's because I know if like I'm gonna take damage from any part of that other tank, I'm dead anyways. And so like that bomb, I mean, it'll get healed up eventually. It'll get healed up before the next one hits me.
Yeah, I try to be up in there DPSing them. It's best to be in there as soon as they spawn because they're actually grouped at that moment.
Yeah.
And it's if you have something like Vortex or Fear or some kind of AoE CC, that's when you want to press it there as well, so you can DPS them down before everyone scatters like ants like that.
All right. Do we want to talk about the last trash pack, the double Marauder Slayer pull? Is that?
Well, I mean, do you want to talk about the boss?
Oh yeah, of course.
Talk about the boss.
I forgot
the boss is like
I forgot the boss is after all that trash as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the boss I think is like the most complicated. Like the way people handle it, because I've seen a lot of pugs. They're just like, I don't understand why the boss is getting stacks and like killing everybody, and that's just mainly due to the shockwave. I think Trell can describe this best because I think he was the one who like initially talked about it.
Yeah, I think there's like a good spot. There's that little triangle marker near the middle of the platform is kind of a good spot to tank the boss at, because right there, because you can bait toward the outside of the room, and whenever he does his frontals, he only has a chance of hitting like one mob that'll give him a stack. And the way it works is when he hits one of the opposite factions mobs, I think, and if he kills them, he gets like a stack of whatever that makes his next melee that hits the tank do group damage. And so if he funnels the other direction from that triangle spot, then he's going to get like 7 stacks and do insane damage the next time he's meleeing the tank. So that's why you want to have like a good area to bait just 1 stack at a time, or maybe even 0 stacks at a time for the shockwaves. Same thing for the whirlwinds that he does, or the blade storm. Sorry, you can just bait the blade storms there because you're already there, and then you run them on the outer ring of the room to avoid most of the mobs.
So what do you guys do about the the archer mobs that have like serrated axe? I don't know the exact name of the mobs for both Alliance and Horde off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's like Axe Thrower and Alliance Archer, I think, are the two.
Yeah, they cast a bleed. It's a serrated axe style bleed. Some tanks have an easier job of getting those grouped up than others. So say Vengeance Demon Hunter with Sigil of Chains, obviously Blood Death Knight with grip. What do you guys do with tanks that don't have grips? Do you just move the boss to the Archer?
You can probably move the boss for most of the sets. The sets that are actually dangerous without something like Death Grip are the ones where the boss is also shockwaving. He does like a series of shockwaves right as the archer spawns, and that's the one you have to worry about. And so like on that set, I asked our healer, for example, to throw a Ring of Peace down to knock the ad toward us, since we can't move the boss. And we also can't go over there and DPS it because we'll bait the shockwaves really poorly if we do. It's also good to just like throw a single stun on them, like Shockwave or Fell Eruption. Not Shockwave. Stormbolt, that's the one.
Yeah.
It's good to just send something like that as soon as they spawn, because they aren't going to live very long and you can avoid the bleed entirely. So if you can do one or maybe both of those things on the dangerous sets, then it really just eliminates the mechanic.
Yeah, and then also you can move the boss as long as you're paying attention to the shockwave timer. Like the shockwave timer, like there are sets where it's not going to shockwave for like another like 10, 12 seconds or something like that. So then you can run up and like bring the boss right towards any of the archers, kill them, and then bring it back right into the right spot. Because those ads, they die within a couple of seconds if you're actually focusing them. So that's what you kind of want to be doing as the tank. Like Trell said, you just like storm pull them, Ring of Peace, CC them anytime that shockwave is going on, and then just go back right on killing the ads. But one ad that you also like, I think I kind of like, people don't really pay attention too much is the Warlock or the Conjurer that happens. It is always hitting tank, I think, the Immolate or whatever the normal ability is. So you do want to kick it in and bring it in, but you really don't want the Firestorms to go off, right? Any of their AoE abilities like Firestorm or Blizzard, because then that does like group damage and it hits the entire team. So that is like definitely the second priority compared to the Archer, but you should definitely try to control that as much. And then the Footman or Grunt, those are useless. Those are useless, die or funnel or whatever. Doesn't matter.
I will say that if your tank has the healing debuff on them, that MS, and they get hit with that bolt, it is like we are really sketched out. Like our tank might die.
Yeah, 100%, but like you should also be realizing that like the ads health at spawn, they're fixed units that can actually be hit prior. So what we were kind of doing early on in the season was we had a Moonkin that was kind of like dotting everything like with Sunfire, whenever the mobs are running through it. And by the time they spawn, they'd be at like 10% health, and then they just get like one tap. Right? I don't think it's something you should actively be trying to like kill, but realize that your AoE damage does hurt the mobs, and you don't want to hit them to the point where you kill them, but hit them to the point where they're at low health. And I think if you can do that kind of optimization, it'd be insane for high keys.
You know something funny about that fight? You actually can't starfall the ads whenever they're active.
Really?
Starfall doesn't hit them.
What?
Yeah. I don't know. It's some bug with the fact that they like start off as inactive or whatever.
Huh.
And so they're just like not flagged for combat correctly, so you actually can't hit them.
But if you do kill them, then they get
you gain
replaced with new ones, right?
Yeah.
Eventually,
They'll get
Yeah.
replaced.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you
I don't
want to
know
get
how
them
often
low
that
but not
happens.
kill them. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to get them like ideally, you just if you're doing AoE, you can kind of pay attention to this DPS. Like, maybe you just like hit it to like half health if you're looking at it. Like, don't ever try to get it to because I think they're also warring with like the other faction, right? And that makes them lose health too. So you don't want to hit them to so low. But this is just like a super optimization. Like, you don't really want to worry about it too much. But like personally, whenever I'm like running around the boss or like thunderclapping, I'm like, oh, this ad over here is to the left of me. He's like at full health. Let me get a little bit of like AoE damage on him and then collect back to the center after.
I also like to mark a spot where we're taking the Blade Storm every single time to make it more consistent for our melee, so they're like aware of where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now let's talk about the final trash pull, Slayer, Marauder. Is this one that
I think
you guys have any trouble with ever, or not so
It's
much?
scary on fortified. It's very
I think
scary
it's-
on fortified.
I think it's
What
pretty.
about bolstering, especially?
I think it's pretty simple to like tackle like what you're supposed to do. On Fortified, I like to kill those Marauders first. So the Marauders and the Slayers both do AoE damage. The damage from the Slayer is the scariest part, but like whenever it's paired up with the Marauders, that's whenever you can potentially die. And so on Fortified, typically the strat is to focus either both the Marauders or one of the Marauders and kill those off first, and then the Slayer will eventually die. Right? I think that's pretty common strat. On Tyrannical, you kind of like ask your healer like, can you heal this? And they say, yeah, consistently, and then you AoE.
I can see a world where this gets lusted in a high 40.
I mean, you're never gonna have lust here is the problem.
Yeah. it
Yeah,
would be
you probably
tough.
would.
Probably
You would have to
not.
lose a
You wanna
lust
miss a
maybe
lust for
somewhere
this?
else.
Yeah.
But
Maybe.
it is insane amount of healing. It's actually like this is probably a huge fort part of like a wall. Like if you had infinite time in this dungeon, this would be the mob that would stop you from progressing at a high heal level.
Yeah, on bolstering it's really bad too because once the two side guys die, then he's bolstered for his last AoE, typically, and then I think
That's
I was
not
watching
good.
like some group limp through it on 28 fort or something, and then that happened and they all died.
Yeah. Okay, and then there's Deos, which of course is your fourth lust if things have worked out with the lusts. Any tips for handling this one?
This is a crazy tank. Like this is a crazy tank damage intake boss fight. That is like people think Deos does the damage, but it's not Deos. It's actually the ads that spawn from those portals that are constantly blasting you with magic damage.
Yeah.
Deos has this crazy like dot like tank frontal that he does, but that's manageable because you know it's coming at a set time, and like you can either leap it, like leap the breath, like on a Vengeance Demon Hunter or like on a warrior, so you take 0 damage. I think you have a clip of that where you can see that you take 0 damage if you do that. But you also, if you have like a cooldown rotation, whether it's like shield wall, spell block, I don't know, like Feldev or whatever, you take nothing, right? But these ads that are constantly blasting you like nonstop are what kills you, or well, at least what kills me every time, no matter what tank I'm playing.
Yeah, those things are nasty. Sometimes I get thrown on them and I freak out.
I think the strat for lust is you either lost the bottom 10% of the boss after he comes back down, or alternatively you can lust the double dragon. Whenever, like right before he phases, whenever the mobs are running across whenever the double dragons are running across the room, you are allowed to lust that. Like I don't think it's super optimal. I think I'd rather lust the boss after you get the damage buff, but I think that lusting those two dragons is also acceptable.
I thought that as well for a while until the last couple of weeks when I realized that. So you spend your 2 minutes, if you're a 2-minute class, most people are. You spend your 2 minutes on the pack before the last boss, right? You have to.
Yeah.
And then your 2 minutes come up typically on the second ad that spawns on the final boss. And so I like lusting right as that second ad spawns because you get a really nice chunk of boss damage in the lust before the boss leaves, because the boss is gone once the double ads come out.
Yeah.
So your lust covers 3 total ads and it hits the boss for quite a bit. Like I don't even touch the second ad during lust; it just dies because we have so much damage.
only
It's really
only
good.
downside of lusting there is like, so whenever after the boss phases, you actually get the buff from the 4 aspects, which gives you a lot more stats, and so like you would rather have it with all of the stats. So I mean that.
Yeah,
so-
but that buff doesn't happen until
No, it happens immediately. The dragons don't show up until later, but the buff happens instantly.
really.
Yeah,
You sure?
I don't know why.
I know that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure why. It just is like that.
I think it just comes down to like, is it a survivability issue, or do you need to make up time for the DPS? Like, you need to make time, right? Like,
Yeah.
for instance, like if you do lust like that in the second ad or into the double ad, like that is for safety. That's straight up for safety because you need to kill those ads in a timely manner, or else your tank is gonna die, your team is gonna die, is doing a ton of damage, and then the rest of the fight is scripted, right? So if you have a plan for it, you'll make it through, and that is essentially where it's gonna make the lust difference, whether you're going to lust in the last phase or you're going to lust in like the first phase. And also, I think a key note that a lot of ranged DPS don't, at least like long range, not like Og doesn't count, but you can actually hit Deos the whole time. Like it was something our Moonkin was doing when we were early progging this fight. Like even when the ads are out, he was still like dotting it, still doing big damage to it. And when intermission finished, or like when the 2 ads died, or it was safe enough, he was just blasting the boss in the air. So by the time the boss came down, he was a much lower health percentage, and we were able to like nick off, was it like 30, 45 seconds off the boss fight than we expected, Trell, when we were progging it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can really save a lot of time on this fight if you play it well. It's a pretty interesting fight.
All right, I think that's it for Rise. That's the stuff we have for that dungeon. Overall, I guess is this one of you guys' favoriter or less favoriter dungeons, to use some scientific terminology this season?
I fucking hate this game. That is scientific.
I
Okay.
don't mind it so much. I really don't like the first area trash. I think that is just overloaded to death with stuff going on, and the mini bosses are so awkward. They have so many shields and points where you can't hit the mobs, you know. But after that, I think it's a pretty good dungeon.
I think I've learned to like it. Like I hated it when I didn't understand it, because there's so many things to this dungeon where there are like small nuances. Like we're talking about the portals, how to deal with the trash, how to deal with Dales. Like when I went there as a Prot Warrior, I was like, what the hell is Blizzard thinking? 80% magic damage? I am dead on the floor all the time. Like I need a cheat trinket for my cheat trinket. Like that's how many times I was like dying in this stupid dungeon. But then now that I understand it, I enjoy it quite a lot more because it's technical. And technical means that you can outplay it, and means it's like a good dungeon in my opinion. Also, I really like to do this on my weekly 20s because there's a chance you get a mount, and you get like a super rare mount. And that like if I'm gonna do weekly keys, it might as well get me something where I actually need, instead of just like crests or like garbage things that I'm gonna like DE or sell.
Good comms.
That's a good point. That is good comms indeed.
That should be your tip next week.
That's a good tip. That is a good tip. You can also get like random Mog pieces as well.
Transmog, yeah.
Yeah, you there's a benefit, right? Like, because usually by the time like 3, 4, 5 weeks into the season, like there's no reason to do the keys. You're just doing them because you want to fill out your vault, right?
Yeah.
So you guys will be getting a net benefit from it, where you get like these mounts which are like very hard to get, right?
Yeah.
That's a Dreadnought answer if I ever thought, you know.
Dude, they should just add this to all the dungeons, man. That would be so cool. Like, I don't know, put some super rare Mog in each one or something as well. I think that'd be sweet. But yeah, okay, so cool. That's Murozund's Rise. Controversial dungeon. I personally am a fan of DPS check style dungeons, although I haven't done any pushing yet this season, so I'll reserve judgment really on how I like this one. But yeah, we've got some Q&A questions to get to, but first we get to thank our supporters over on the Patreon. Hope everybody has a good holiday season as well. We'll be taking next week off, by the way, so...
we forgot to mention that. Oh,
yeah, we mentioned it at the end of last week's show.
Surprise.
You know, we put some bonus announcements in the middle of the show where, 50% of people have already cut out for the week, but anyways, some of our lovely patrons include, but my brick is huge and I need to show it off. Why axe no drop? Madge. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a fire tornado. Never Nude, Jaw, King of Skills, Chromed, Trekkie, Chewy. Meta is Make Evoker Transcendent again. Meta could also be Mages Ensures Titles achievement, but it's definitely not Most Effective Tactics available. I think it might be all of those things. Salty Seni, ZivXX, Necros, Tankdill, Nevuk. EV Year of the Sphere it has extended into 2023. Bless up. No Trick, I forgot I was subbed here. Dymat, Rework Mistweaver, Nyx. I may be bricked up, but at least now the boss is dead. Gallic, Threesif, Dratno Shards Abyss. They wish you chained, Firelord, bound as your predecessor was to the Firelands alone. M Sanity, Xena, Rogue is now good enough for prog, but still bad enough to be zapped for SLG. Bless up.
Dude, that guy showed back up this week and typed in our Patreon Discord. It was like, "Thanks for all the shout outs. My guild loves it."
Red Color, YouTube.com/Workbringer, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Nevermore, number one Simsky for Trelsky. Lurka would like to remind everyone that loose mobs in the back are a lifestyle choice and shouldn't be scorned at in every key. Milk, Sife. Buff Prot Warrior has showed up in our Patreon readouts here, and I note that it was typed in by an anonymous anteater 20 seconds ago.
I don't know how that showed up. That's really weird. That's such a great. That's such a great thing. Yeah, you're so smart.
Windwalker monks deal with nerfs by rolling with the punches. Thesaurus.com is a powerful tool. The Marsh Hare, my raid buff is my great personality and good looks. I play Ellie Shaman. Thank you for listening to the Titanforge podcast. Is brought to you by Daddy Dratty, Grampy Trelsky, and the Tettles Effect. Big Head Small Brain, King's Honor Fellow Horde. It's me, your newest guild member, Juniper. Tettles spreading misinformation on the internet again. Jatto and Honey Chunk Forever. Chauncey, that moment when your tank says, "Now where's my ranged at?" during Jade Serpent Dragon Boss and bricks your key. Feral Druids in the MDI, you've got to be kidding me. Oh, you don't have that yet? Boom. Sire Dematicus has shown you his back. His brick. Please respond.
Dude, not another brick one.
They're bricked up in the Patreons this week. The small mammal living in Dratnos' shirt. Sapphire. My name is Dratty D, and I publicly admit I was bricked up after killing Mythic Fireack. I'm not kidding. Group/raid buffs/utility spells tier list when I'm losing my raid to Neltharion weak auras. I can definitely believe it's not butter. Rock and Stone. So did Dratnos win the fight. Number one Mythic Guild with a 1 day a week raid schedule and a bunch of Canadians, NA. Congratnos to Dratnos for 100k YouTube subs. And Tettles forced me to reroll Frost Mage. Bellular's lawyers will be in touch shortly to collect damages on my behalf. And Francis. Thanks all for the support.
What is that name?
Dude, they've been cooking in those in the Patreon Discord. Yeah.
They're so bricked up.
They are.
They are bricked up, yeah.
Stop it.
Can't argue with that. All right, we've got some Q&A questions. First one's for you, Pika, and it comes from Daddy Puffin that says, what advice, if any, would you give to newer tanks trying to break into M+?
I would say that in order to enjoy M+, you're not going to really enjoy it in the pug scene. You're going to enjoy it with a group of friends that you can laugh at when you have misfortune, that when you want to coordinate something, you have that ability to, especially if you're an off-meta tank. So for me, like, I get the most enjoyment when I'm playing with friends. It doesn't have to be like the highest of keys. We don't have to be doing it like 28s, 29, 30s, but having able to like discover the coordination that you can have when you're doing, like, I think like the most fun we had this season for me was like we were figuring out, okay, so you're gonna start with the swoop, then we're gonna have the eruption or the upheaval, then the Toll does 2 more CCs, then Trail does 2 more CCs, and we're like practicing that on like every dungeon, and it became like our super fun CC set, right? So like find a group of friends that you can kind of create strategies together with, and it'll make tanking way more enjoyable. But when you're in the pug scenario, you can't really take any situation like as what is going to be. Like, you're going to die as a Prot Warrior in the pug area like all the time because people aren't kicking, people aren't like using their stuns or CCs. But you can really see the strength or the failures of any tank when you have a more coordinated scenario. So like go in, even if your friends aren't very good, or even they suck, or even if you just need to add people that you can play with consistency. Because consistency is key to have a good time when you're a brand new tank, and just like focus on that, and then you'll have a lot more fun in it.
I would say that if they don't have control in their tank kit, they might consider playing a tank with control if they have to pug, like Vengeance or Prop Alley right now.
Yeah, but that's an answer from a Fodom reroller. Like, I'm saying, like, if you want to be who you want to be,
just to consider
like,
it.
Play what you love, and then find ways to make it fun, not just re-roll Paladin, which is what Teddles puts in my chat all the time.
Are you re-rolling Prop Paladin?
No, it's a fun alt experience.
It's just a phase, Dad.
Just an alt.
Yeah.
I swear.
It's just my alt that I do 29s on. Yeah, okay. Word.
we just happened to time the keys, so we kept going. I don't know what to tell you.
Shit.
I was just doing an alt key and someone put it in the 29.
I only do alt keys for 2 hours a week, and I just started taking hours from 2025 to do this week's push on it.
True.
All right, our next question comes from Theon in Discord that says, we've gotten new talent trees, the upgrade system, and many things unlock account-wide, also looking at warbands in the future. What's the next big improvement for retail? Is it something to do with M+ or Raid?
I don't think it's either. I think that Mythic Plus and Raid are both in maintenance mode. Personally, I think that like the next big improvement for the game itself. So the improvement this expansion was what, the talent system? I think really made the game a lot
Talents, upgrades,
Yeah.
upgrade system.
better. I think both of those are really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think hero talents are the big one.
Yeah, but that's like a feature, not like a. I guess in the same way talent trees are. Okay, yeah, so that could sort of count. I think. Let's see. I think Cross Realm Mythic from day one is something that I would count as a. I think I don't know if they've announced that they're going to do that or something, but they should if they haven't.
A reworked Great Vault.
They are doing that. They are a little bit. They're removing the PvP rows and putting in the delve rows.
I gotta say, I hate all your guys' answers. You guys are such the 1% answers, only caring about progression and rating. Like, I actually
True.
think they
I
should
said the
focus on
vault.
easy thing. That is also like you care because it's related to your player power. Like, I actually think a huge thing of the game, even though I probably wouldn't do it myself, and I don't care because I do things like transmog, is like even just go back to like the player housing.
Yeah.
People want like identities in the game. Like you want those like casual players to like have hours and hours of fun to make your like the servers and the game alive. Like I listen to people play Final Fantasy, and God forsake, I'm like, what the hell are you doing for like hours upon hours? And they're like looking at like, oh, how can I make my house prettier? They're spending like so much content time, like I'm bidding on a house lot. Right. And like in WoW, we're caring about how can I get this like 1% upgrade that is like going to give me minuscule amount of damage that really doesn't really make a difference on whether I time the key or not. Because like on Kindrel, it's like don't get hit by fire beams and you can do it.
Yeah.
But like having these other small nuances will help reinvigorate the game or at least make the game like interesting. And so that when I log in, I don't have to be like, okay, well, how do I get this Mythic Plus right away? It's like, oh, I can log in. Oh, let me work on, how can I get this new wardrobe or something to make it my house and my experience feel more fun.
I think housing would be a big undertaking if they did it right. Obviously, if they like half-ass it again like they did with garrisons, then that's not going to do anything. But I will say, don't copy the Final Fantasy lot bidding system and the way that they've somehow managed to introduce not enough housing supply in a virtual game. That's something that we don't need to bring over from the real world if they ever do that in WoW.
Shout out Canada and the housing crisis, I guess.
Yeah. I think one other thing I think they should do, I think they should go back to personal loot for LFR. I don't know, just make it fully tradable, but go back to personal loot instead of rolling for LFR gear and having it being like you want to like zone into LFRs that have less people wearing your armor type and stuff, because then you have a higher chance of getting gear. That's just so weird to me.
I still think personal loot makes sense for literally every group except for guild groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was just fully tradable personal loot, that would be the same as. So if they were to do that, I think I'd be fine with that. Just fully tradable personal loot has the same upsides as the current system. The problem is if it's not fully tradable, then you got especially with the amount of gear steps there are now, that would be really bad, right? Because there's literally 4 different eye level small steps in the raid, and so if you couldn't trade the 483 bracers because you have 480 bracers, that would be extreme cringe. But as long as they didn't have the tradability restriction, then that I'd be fine with that. I just think during LFR in particular, it's super weird.
I agree with that actually a lot, because I'm not going to say that I was in this guild group or whatever, but we may have queued a LFR looking for certain tier pieces, and it may brought up the thought of kicking pugs on the same tier piece if like it dropped, and like having like mass reporting like, oh, let's kick this paladin because he's also on this like tier slot, and we are trying to like focus it so our DK or like whatever class gets that specific tier slot. And that's like a really toxic thing. And I'm not saying that our guild was a part of that, but I've definitely seen guilds do that, and
you felt the incentive to do that, and of course resisted.
Kick the guy because like he has the same.
You know what's funny about this is we actually did resist, and the warlock was in for the LFR kill, and then he got both the tier pieces that we ran into on that full run. We had like
Uh,
16 people in that run and like one random, and he got both.
No good deed goes unpunished. That's how that goes. All right, our final question of the show and of the year says, discuss how Titan forging was the best mechanic in WoW ever added and that it should come back. Thanks.
All right, I think that's going to be the end of the show this week.
I'm down.
I'm not down, dude. The reasons to do Mythic Plus and like feel rewarded, other than these Raider IO points that really don't matter, was actually a great feeling. And I know it sucks for people who just can't put as much time into it, but like I'm a little bit on the trade of like I liked Azurite Power because it was something to do every day, and I liked Titan Forging because it was like something that was like I could work towards, even though like it really didn't matter, but it was like fun to like have that small chance to get that legendary drop that was like Titan Forge.
All right, and on that, we will be out of here for the rest of the year. Everybody should make sure to go check out Plkatv over on Twitch, mostly. As I think that's your like primary content place, right?
Big YouTube now with the dev interview and like all the Mythic Plus runs we've been putting out and guides. So yeah, check out my YouTube. YouTube.com/plktv, and then also twitch.tv/plktv.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming on the show once again, and yeah, we'll see you guys in next year. Bye, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Goodbye.
GG.